This PowerPoint will give the introduction to China. Ignore the timeline stuff. That's for an assignment that we're not going to do. Alright, so ancient China is very similar to ancient Mesopotamia. A bunch of hunter and gatherers come, they follow animals, they find a river valley that floods every year, and that's where they're going to start their first towns, which are going to lead to bigger cities and basically what we saw for Mesopotamia. I would say that the first dynasty doesn't really begin in China till about 1750 BCE. Before that, we have a lot of different cultures in China, but not really one real China yet. And I know there'd be people out there that would argue with me, including your Chinese teacher. So our first dynasty in this class, we're going to look at the Shang dynasty. This dynasty starts in 1750, runs for about 750 years. Starts in the Huanghe Valley, and it's the first Chinese dynasty ever. One of the big things about this dynasty is that they're big into worshiping their ancestors. We see that being a major part of societal identity, and it's kind of the closest thing we have to a religion at this time. It's during this time that we'll see the introduction of writing. On the right hand side you'll see a picture. This was also in your textbook reading. This is actually an old turtle shell. To communicate with the ancestors, what they would do is they would take bones or these turtle shells and they'd write questions on them using pictograph writing of the time. So what this writing was, they believed that the spirits could affect daily life. The spirits might even be able to predict the future. And so you'd write your question on the turtle bone or whatever bones that you were using. You would then take a hot piece of metal and touch the bone with it until the bone cracked. And at this time there were people who believed that they could read the cracking in the bones or the turtle shell, and that cracking, the sound it made and the pattern of the cracking, were the answers from the ancestors. They had volumes and volumes of writing on what do different cracks mean, what do different sounds mean, and people devoted basically their lives to understanding this. But this is our introduction of writing. It's also at this time that we get silk being worked. So we start seeing silk clothing and things in China. Our second dynasty will be the Zhou dynasty. Kind of like G.I. Joe, Zhou dynasty. It's going to start 1000 BCE. And depending on who you ask, it's got different end dates. I'm going to say that it ends in 480 BCE, and here's why. There's a civil war in China going on from 770 to 480, and it's not until 480 that the last of the Zhou rulers are gone. As these rulers, these Zhou people, are the first ones to introduce this idea of the mandate of heaven. This is an idea of how a ruler takes power. When they took over, they were not related to the last dynasty. So they had to come up with some excuse on why they were right to rule, and the old dynasty had to be killed or overthrown. So they have this idea that good rulers who are being good as far as worshiping the ancestors, doing what the universe wants. Rulers who are treating their people right. rulers who are behaving like good people, when they're in power, times are good. But if they start to become bad rulers, bad people, then the regular common people are punished. They're punished with droughts or flooding or any kind of natural disaster, even sicknesses. It's believed at this time that those are kind of punishments from the universe, telling the people, you have a bad ruler and it's your job to rise up and get rid of that ruler. That's what the Zhou said when they took over. They said, hey, we have lots of disasters going on. It's the universe saying someone needs to overthrow that first dynasty. And the Zhous did that. This, of course, is going to come back and punish them, because anytime a lot of disasters hit, people now believe it's a sign that the government needs to be overthrown. It's at this time that China enters the Iron Age. We're also going to see more of a uniform coin coming at this time. You can see pictures of that in the corner here. But the Zhou is going to come to an end with a civil war. You see, they set up this idea that when disasters hit, the rulers need to be overthrown. Now, not just one disaster, but a whole bunch of them in a few years. And in the 700s, they start getting a bunch of disasters. So a whole bunch of groups are going to try and take over. And it's a couple hundred years of civil war. It's called the Warring States period. One group in particular is going to take power, and they're going to set up the Qin dynasty. If you've seen the movie The Mummy, yeah, they had the Dragon Emperor in that movie. He was supposed to be Qin Shi Huangdi. Don't get your history from movies. So he's not the character that you saw Jet Li play. But this group, this little kingdom, is going to conquer all the other kingdoms in China and set up the third dynasty. Now, if you look at the dates, this dynasty does not last very long. But Qin Shi Huangdi is the first emperor, and in fact, that's his title, the first emperor. He's not calling himself a king, he's saying he's higher than a king. He's the emperor. Now, he does a lot of things that help China. He starts connecting these walls that are all over China, connecting all these pieces to make one great wall. And in fact, the Great Wall is the only man-made structure that can be seen from space. He doesn't actually build the wall, he just connects pieces that have already been built by previous kings and emperors. Kings and dynasty rulers. He's going to do other things. He's going to improve farming, dig canals, but he does it in a very ruthless way. If you oppose him, you die. He works people to death. So he was not a very kind ruler. And that's going to lead to our fourth dynasty, the Han dynasty. Now, look carefully at the dates here. It starts in BCE and it ends in CE. We'll see a lot of inventions during this dynasty. We have a lot of peace, a lot of free time, and so we'll see things like the paper we use today is invented during this time. The picture is showing you a really cool, like a teapot. The water comes out of the dragon's mouths, goes into the frogs' mouths. So we see art advancing, we see inventions. But then when the Han Dynasty falls, it's going to be another 350 years of civil war and chaos. Alright, this 5th dynasty is often ignored by a lot of people. Some argue, and you could say they're right, that this isn't even a real dynasty. It's incredibly short, but I'm pointing this out for a reason. Up until this time, there was no real central religion in China. When Buddhism first gets into China, they are very hated. Buddhist temples are often attacked, graffitied, burned down. Buddhist priests are often attacked, sometimes even killed. They're taxed a lot by the government. And just horrible, horrible things are happening to Buddhists. And it's during this dynasty that Buddhism starts to become popular. We get people in the government who start converting to Buddhism. And it sends a message, hey, Buddhism is good, or at the very least, okay. And then later, China is going to export Buddhism to the rest of Asia. Alright, 6th dynasty is the Tang dynasty. You read a little bit about this in the book, or you will. Runs for about 300 years. But it's during this dynasty that we'll see the first female emperor in Chinese history. Emperor Wu Zhao of the Tang dynasty. When I was a teenager, a very popular band out there was the Wu-Tang Clan. And so that's pretty much how I remember her name. She's Wu Zhao, Tang dynasty, Wu-Tang. You guys probably have no idea who they are. Just shows how old I am. But she is the only female emperor in Chinese history. She will even set up a lot of powerful women during her reign in China. The 7th dynasty is the Song dynasty. There are a couple of different start dates, but they're basically a year apart, so I don't think a year makes that big of a difference. They'll run for about 300 years. It's at this time that we really have an explosion of Chinese inventions. Medicine advances, the arts advance, literature, society, you name it. Pretty much everything except military. And that's why they fall. Because to the north are a bunch of guys called the Mongolians. Europeans will call them the Huns. They'll start the 8th dynasty. And they will be the only people outside of China to conquer all of China. In fact, the Mongolians will have the largest empire in world history. So the start date depends on your definition of this dynasty. Genghis Khan is going to come in. He's going to unite all these different tribes of Mongolians, these people who fight on horseback, and they're going to start conquering China. Now at first, they're attacking China, taking the stuff they want, killing people, and then leaving. Then one day they attack a city, and one of the Chinese guys in the city says, hey, Genghis, Mr. Khan, if you let us live and keep our stuff, you can call yourself the emperor. And then instead of taking my stuff now and being rich for a few weeks, you can tax us and be rich forever. Genghis Khan thinks that's a pretty good idea. So he starts conquering and controlling China. But he's going to die before he conquers all of China. His grandson, Kublai Khan, is going to conquer the rest of China in 1279. So I would say the dynasty truly starts in 1279 when all of China is under Mongolian rule. This 9th dynasty kind of falls outside of our class. Our class only goes to 1400, and yes, the Ming dynasty starts before 1400, but just barely. So you don't really need any notes from this, but it's a fun dynasty. It's during this dynasty that the Chinese rise up and overthrow the Mongolians. And China becomes a Chinese country again, completely controlled by the Chinese. At this time, there's a revival in art, architecture, math, and even exploration. The Chinese build a fleet of giant ships, and they send them out to explore the world. These ships go all over the place. They're gone for years. They come back. They have reports of everything they saw, things they bring back from places they went, and they put all this stuff before the emperor. And for some reason, the emperor orders all the ships burned, all the records destroyed, anything brought back destroyed, and wants to pretend like it never happened. We don't really know why, but that's what happened. In the lower right-hand side, your right, you'll see kind of the first calculator from ancient China called an abacus. On the left is a nice piece of porcelain. There are a lot of inventions and things like that, but it's a little taste. Alright, so still awake? Still paying attention? Want to see something funny? So here's a picture of me, my first year teaching. Here's a picture of me, my first year teaching, climbing a coconut tree and picking a coconut. Yeah. Didn't know my wife was taking the picture.